Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. And in this video I'm going to help you to unlock the secrets of occult symbols, and I'm going to tell you how to decode occult symbols. And if you've begun your journey into magic and you have looked for some of the seminal texts on magic and the seminal magical books that you can use, you've probably come across the Greater Key of Solomon, and you've probably come across the planetary talismans in that book. Well, there's a few different layers to this, and if you understand the way that these talismans are constructed, the meaning behind why certain different aspects of it incorporated into the final design, then you have the code for unlocking the meaning of these symbols. So I'm going to use the planetary talismans from the Key of Solomon as an example here of how you can decode magical symbols. The techniques, the style that is used in constructing the Key of Solomon talismans is widely used elsewhere in Western esotericism in order to create complex magical symbols. Well, the first thing that you need to understand is magical alphabets. So when you look at the talismans in the Key of Solomon and elsewhere, such as the 6th and 7th books of Moses, and when you look at the symbols on some of the ritual tools that are used in Western ceremonial magic and the characters that are inscribed on them, one language in particular is used more than any other, and that is Hebrew. And if you look at the planetary talismans in the Key of Solomon, it's almost all written in Hebrew. The first thing you need to understand is the Hebrew alphabet and being able to transliterate the Hebrew letters in the talisman. And then, of course, there is the work of translating the Hebrew words into whatever language is native to you. But that's not the end of the story, because we see, in addition to Hebrew characters, other much stranger symbols around the periphery and within the planetary talismans. And these symbols are also Hebrew, but a different script to traditional Hebrew. They are instead characters taken from the magical alphabets. There are 4 magical alphabets that are used in Western magic, and what they essentially are is a kind of cipher. There's a number of symbols, and each one of these symbols is a substitute for one of the Hebrew letters. So you're writing something out in Hebrew, but instead of using the normal Hebrew letters, you're using the substituted letter from this magical alphabet. So let's have a look at this chart of magical alphabets to further illustrate what I'm talking about here. So you'll see here that there's 4 different alphabets. The one at the very top is what's called the Theban alphabet. This is the exception of the 4 in that it is an alphabet that is based on the English letters rather than Hebrew. But as you can see, there are 3 other magical alphabets in this table, each one referring to the Hebrew letters, substituting the Hebrew letters. So the Hebrew letter Aleph has an equivalent in the characters of celestial writing, second from the top, as it does in the writing called Malachim, and so forth. And you'll see there's the writing called Passing the River. And each one of these is used in one or the other magical talisman to further encrypt the words of power and the meaning that is encoded into the talisman. So by way of example, let's look at the 6th pentacle of the sun in the Key of Solomon. So you'll see that there's 2 types of script that are used in this particular symbol. Within the innermost part of the talisman, it's all written in the writing of Passing the River. And the outermost circle is written in Hebrew. Hebrew, of course, is written and read from right to left instead of left to right. And the purpose of this talisman is purportedly to grant the magician the power of invisibility, the power to go unseen. So, when we transliterate and translate the figures in this talisman, what does it tell us? Well, in the very middle of the talisman, we have the letter Yod, a letter representing God the Father. Around the three corners of the innermost triangle, not counting the stylized Yod, we have the name Shaddai, a holy name of God, a word of power. And then in the next layer, we have Hebrew script, which, in the opinion of Samuel Mathers, is Genesis 1, chapter 1, a very sacred and very powerful verse in the Bible, with the beginning of Genesis being the basis of many of the names of God. The 72 names of the Shem Ham Forash are encoded into the beginning of Genesis. So we have words of power, divine words, to give force to the talisman. And then around the outermost circle, the Hebrew text is referring to Psalms 69 verse 23 and 135 verse 16. Let their eyes be darkened that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake. They have eyes and see not. So we see here how the Psalms are used as a magical conjuration, almost like a magical spell when they are spoken forth or written to send forth a certain intent. And this is something that's very common in a lot of magical traditions which draw upon Western esotericism. And we have a psalm here which is symbolically linked to perhaps the granting of the power of invisibility. So now we have the meaning behind the talisman by decoding the magical alphabets, by translating the Hebrew, and understanding the meaning of words of power, God names, but also understanding the symbolic meaning behind certain psalms or biblical verses that are written on the talisman. So that's a good primer for this video. By applying a few principles, understanding that Hebrew is often the language used for these sorts of talismans, by understanding magical alphabets, and by understanding the significance of certain God names and certain biblical verses, we have managed to decode the meaning of an entire talisman. But there's other mysteries and other secret symbols that are used in some other talismans, which I'll go into in a subsequent video to expand our knowledge even further. But it's an important thing to know what the symbols that you're using really mean. You may be content to just trust the writer of whatever magical book you're using, but unfortunately, in the occult world, there are a lot of really pretentious people and people who like to show how intellectually superior they are to other people by doing really terrible things to them. And one of the things that can happen is you get writers of magical texts who put deliberate traps in the texts. So they might use a particular invocation or conjuration in a different language and have it say something completely the opposite to what it's purportedly saying. And the careful student, the diligent student, will translate the conjuration first to see exactly what it is they're doing. But the less careful student, or perhaps not less careful, but the more trusting student will just read whatever is put in front of them. But obviously the people who have been involved in a lot of these occult groups weren't doing the work on themselves, so they weren't always the best people. So it's something you need to sort of be aware of. It also adds a greater depth and richness to what you're doing if you can understand whatever symbols you're employing in fine detail. And even though there's the sort of chaos magic idea that belief is only a tool and nothing is true and everything is permitted, and perhaps the meaning that was intended behind the symbols doesn't matter because only the meaning you invest in it matters. That's certainly a school of thought, but I do think that when you're using symbols that are hundreds of years old in particular, that have been used in the same way by many different people, these things tend to have a kind of morphic resonance to them, particularly when you're talking about magical symbols. So it's always good to try and know and understand the established meaning of magical symbols. But that's all for today. I'll do a subsequent video discussing some of the other methods you can use to decode magical symbols. Thanks again for listening. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below. Please subscribe so you can get updates on the release of new videos, which I'm trying to do at least once a week. You can support my channel by doing that. You can support my channel by liking the video as well. So please do that if you would like to. Otherwise, thanks again. See you next time.